Our next speaker is the Vice Chief of Space Operations for the $30 billion per year U.S. Space Force. He is also an acquisition officer by training, and his past commands have included both Commander of Space Systems Command and also as the Deputy Director of NRO. Please welcome General Michael Guetlein.
Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing today? So I got all sorts of microphones up here. I'm not sure what's going on. Hey, the way I kind of was just talking to Jim about this is I have a few comments just to kind of get your blood flowing. Then we'll just open it up to questions if that's okay with you guys. There's a lot going on in the environment as you're tracking, and I think the dialogue is more important than me trying to sit up here and kind of spit things at you about what's going on, what I think is going on in my view of the world. But I do want to set the stage on a few things. Everybody was tracking the CSO's comments at AFA a couple weeks ago, and you could kind of sense a different narrative starting to be teased out of, hey, there's something different happening here. And I'll tell you what it is. We are at an inflection point in the United States Space Force. We are in the process of pivoting from what used to be a service focused on providing the most exquisite space services on the planet to the warfighter and to the nation. And what do I mean by that? We provided exquisite SATCOM. We provided unwavering missile warning, the best position navigation and timing through GPS. We provided weather. We have an exquisite launch history of success. All of that was our legacy coming into the United States Space Force. But as we've continued to talk about, all of that capability was focused on providing a service because space was considered a benign environment and we didn't have to worry about protecting and defending it. The reason we stood the United States Space Force up was to make a pivot because we had seen our near peers starting to catch up with us and starting to get very capable and very determined at denying our ability to use space. So what we did not inherit when we stood up the United States Space Force is space superiority as a core function. We didn't have the doctrine, we didn't have the culture, we didn't have the kit. And part of standing up the Space Force was to make it a war-fighting force, capable of protecting and defending our capabilities in and through space, capable of guaranteeing that we are going to have space superiority for the joint force no matter what the joint force is asked to do. That is the pivot that we are trying to make in the United States Space Force. And you're starting to see the pivot in the language as we go before that. But we are still new enough that many people don't even understand the Space Force is real. I run into them all the time in the airports. I run into them on the Hill. I run into military members of the other services that didn't know we were real. And I will tell you, that was a luxury that we had when space wasn't contested. We no longer enjoy that luxury. We have to change the dialogue. We have to change the way we view it. We have to understand that there is a Space Force. And the purpose of the Space Force is to guarantee space superiority for the joint force. Not space for space sake. Space to guarantee that just like all the other domains, we can fight as a joint force. And we can depend on those capabilities. I don't have to tell you space is the foundation for our way of life. There's many people in our nation today that don't understand that. They don't understand how dependent we have become as a nation, how that timing signal drives every aspect of their daily lives, from their cell phones to their TVs, to their refrigerators, to the cars, to the transportation, to the infrastructure, the power grid, etc. But there was a gentleman's agreement until recent that we didn't mess with each other's space systems. We didn't jam them, we didn't spoof them, we didn't laze them. We just kept them safe. We didn't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, our current adversaries are willing to go against international norms of behavior go against that gentleman's agreement, and they're willing to do it in very unsafe and unprofessional manners. The new norms of behavior in space, unfortunately, within the past 3 years, jamming, spoofing, dazzling, norms of behavior, they're happening all around us. Cyber hacks are happening all around us on a day-to-day basis. What's more concerning is the new kit that they're bringing to the fight. Nesting dolls in space that capable of launching an ASAT to take out, or a missile to take out another satellite. Shadowing U.S. satellites. Multiple satellites up there today are shadowing our U.S. satellites in a cat and mouse game. We move, they move, we move, they move. We don't know what their intent is. We don't know what their capabilities are. Unsafe, unprofessional. We're seeing grappling arms in space capable of towing another satellite or holding it hostage. We're seeing nukes in space now, or the talk of nukes in space. That would have never happened before we stood up the United States Space Force. That's one of the reasons we've got to stand up the United States Space Force, to deter aggression of that magnitude. Now we're seeing hypersonics capable of traveling in excess of 3,800 miles an hour, capable of carrying all sorts of different warheads. How do we combat that? We're seeing small UASs flying over our cities. We're seeing fractional orbital bombardment systems, or a missile capable of going all the way around the planet in low Earth orbit and striking any point on the globe that they want to hit. Extremely hard to defend against that capability. And we're also now starting to see our near peers focusing on practicing dogfighting in space with satellite on satellite. The environment has completely changed. There used to be a capability gap between us and our near peers, mainly driven by the technological advancement of the United States. That capability gap used to be massive. That capability gap is significantly narrowed. And we've got to change the way we're looking at space, or that capability gap may reverse and not be in our favor anymore. So people no longer have the luxury of not knowing that there's a Space Force, because the threat is real. But I'll also tell you, we are buying space superiority today on the cheap. 15,000 Guardians at 3.5% of the DoD budget is what we are using to buy the capability to protect and defend space for generations to come. We're buying it on the cheap, and you get what you pay for. That's why we're trying to change the narrative. The Space Force that we inherited, the Space Force that we have today, is orders of magnitude better than the Space Force we inherited in 2019. But I'll tell you, the Space Force that we have today is not the Space Force that we need. We've got to change our culture. We've got to change our training. We've got to change our TTPs, our ConOps. We've got to change our kit going forward, because this is the most complex and challenging strategic environment that we have seen in a long time, if not ever. It is our job, the United States Space Force, to guarantee that the advantage is in our favor and that we can have and enjoy space superiority well into the future. In order to do that, we need a credible fighting force, and we need the capability to deter and, if necessary, defeat aggression. That is the inflection point that you're seeing today. The American public should be extremely proud of their Guardians, 15,000 strong, deployed 24/7 around the globe, protecting and defending what I will argue is the largest area of responsibility in the DoD. You have the world's greatest Air Force forged from the world's greatest world's greatest Space Force forged from the world's greatest Air Force. And I know I sound like a broken record, but we're only going to be as good as the amount of resources that we're willing to put towards space superiority. And with that, I will open it up to your questions.
General, I'll open it up, and you're very clear on the need for space superiority as the prime imperative. And you talked a little bit about China and Russia and increasing aggressiveness. Is there anything else you want to say on the types of counterspace capability that China and Russia could be developing? And on the other side of that, is the Space Force able to fully respond to each of those new threats in both kinetic and non-kinetic ways?
What last part of your question was?
Responding to threats from China and Russia, kinetic, non-kinetic.
So let me start with the capabilities that we're seeing are exquisite. We know they have the ability to launch a missile to destroy a satellite in orbit. We know they have deployed more jammers than any other nation on the planet. We know they have the ability to laze our current ISR satellites, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites. We have watched them do orbital operations, satellite on satellite. We are picking up a lot of this behavior with our commercial capabilities, which enables us to have better situational awareness, but also enables us to have conversations that we were never able to have before. We have seen them become extremely capable of grappling a satellite and towing it to a different orbit. They just deployed a gas station in geosynchronous orbit, so 22,000 miles away. We have seen the entire spectrum of capabilities to include directed energy being fielded by our near peers on a day-to-day basis. So how do you get after protecting and defending that capability? How do you, more importantly, guarantee that the space capabilities that we provide to the joint force of the nation will be there during times of crisis or conflict? You can do that a couple different ways. Build resiliency into your space systems. We're hardening our space systems. We are adding in dual redundant capabilities. We're proliferating our capabilities with organizations like Space Development Agency. But that still is not enough. We still got to go further. So we are looking at off-board defense capabilities. How do I protect and defend off-board? But then we're also really leaning heavily on partnerships. It used to be that the DoD had to own and operate our own kit because we wanted to make sure that kit was going to be there during times of crisis or conflict without fail. And we felt like we needed to own and operate it all. And that worked very good for us while we had the corner on technology. But we no longer have the corner on technology. Commercial has it, as well as our allies. All of us operating together are better than the sum of the parts. So we're really doubling down on partnerships. Partnerships get us proliferation, it gets us excess capacity, it gets us redundancy. It makes the attack surface much broader for our adversaries, so they can't just take one of us out, they actually have to take all of us on. So we're fully embracing partnerships as a way to get after resiliency, to guarantee that capability will be there during times of crisis or conflict.
General, thank you for a very thoughtful talk. Indo-PACOM commander has been very vocal about the need to blind, deceive, or destroy China ISR spacecraft constellations to prevent China from targeting the joint force. Is that something we can do today, or do we need to develop more capability?
We definitely need to develop more capability. The Chinese ISR capabilities are becoming very capable. They have gone from what we used to call a kill chain to a kill mesh. Basically, a kill chain was I could take out any element in the kill chain, whether it be the shooter, the bullet, or the target, and I could defeat the kill chain. Today, all that stuff is now intertwined. Their ISR satellites are intertwined with their PNT satellites, intertwined with their weapon systems. So this mesh network, if you will, becomes very hard to counter. So we've got to start focusing on how to get after that, because by meshing all this stuff together, they have basically eroded the tyranny of distance. So I can no longer be far enough away from the fight to keep the forces safe. The forces are now able to be targeted anywhere on the planet. So in order to do that, I have to counter their ability to see our forces and then rebuild that tyranny of distance. So we are looking at what are all the different options for doing counter C5 ISRT to protect the carrier fleet in the Pacific and to keep them from being targeted.
One thing that's in the news a lot that we're talking with many of the guests today is about the Golden Dome for America. Mm-hmm. Would appreciate your thoughts on the space component of that. And I know that you're limited in what you can say, but given the schedule urgency, what can industry be doing to expedite your mission?
Let me talk about the magic of Golden Dome, in my mind, is going to be the integration of capabilities that were never meant to be networked or integrated before. We are very good at building stovepipe capabilities for the Space Force, for the Air Force, for the Army, for the Navy, for Missile Defense Agency. The real magic in Golden Dome is going to be our ability to integrate across all of those organizational boundaries into a seamless capability that is going to require the integration of space with missile defense that we haven't traditionally done. The integration of missile defense with the air layer, integration of the air layer with the sea layer. That's going to be our biggest challenge. And I will argue that many pieces of the puzzle for Golden Dome already exist. They're just not connected today. And the magic is going to be in our ability to connect them, which, if you heard me talk a couple of weeks ago, is really an organizational behavior challenge, less of a technology challenge.
Earlier in the day, we heard from the Army, also the Chief, General Alvin, and we heard a little bit from the Navy about this philosophical shift away from expensive, exquisite capabilities to a mix of expensive, exquisite, and attritable, affordable capabilities. Is Space Force on that journey in space? Are you on that journey as well?
We absolutely are. That's why you see the proliferated architectures right now in LEO and MEO, is because we know if we want to have the most exquisite system on the planet, it's going to cost a lot. And if it's going to cost a lot, I want to have very few of them. And if I have very few of them, that makes them very, very easy to be targeted. If we go to smaller, less capable, less expensive systems, we can have more of them, we can proliferate them, it becomes harder to take that capability out. So we're pursuing those in SATCOM, we're pursuing that in missile warning, we're pursuing that and looking at that now in PNT, and I think that'll keep on growing from there.
So a final question before I kick it back to Jim, who'll hit you with the harder questions. Any update on other Space Force core missions that you haven't already discussed? We focused in a few areas, other areas that are on your mind?
New core missions. I would say not any new core missions. Our core missions are pretty much staying a little bit static, but what is changing is the mix of what is organic, what is commercial, and what is allied into what we call hybrid architectures, which are the connection and the networking of all three, DoD, commercial, and allied. Last April, we published the commercial space strategy, which was discussing how we were going to get after it from a commercial perspective. This spring, we will publish the international space strategy. And when you plug both of those together with the current capabilities we have, that will enable hybrid architectures. That will probably be our growth area for the foreseeable future.
Sir. Oh, you're looking at me, sir?
Or anybody, whoever wants to ask a question.
Yes, sir. So if I understand it correctly, too, we got plenty of time. We've got about 12 minutes left. Can I throw out a couple of them?
Okay.
And I think you said you're comfortable taking a few from the audience? Yeah. Perfect. So get your questions ready. I know you're limited on what you can say because it's obviously pre-decisional. But given what's out there in the public domain about, for example, Golden Dome, what are the types of things that you would be telling industry to get going now in terms of spending their IRAD or their CapEx facility investment? What are the types of things, given the fact that it's going to be very obvious that the Space Force is going to have a very significant role, what are the expectations of what you would expect the contractors to deliver?
Yeah, so we haven't determined yet what kit is actually under the umbrella of Golden Dome. Okay. That is still in discussions. I think it goes to the president at the end of the month.
Yes, sir.
But what we do know is that we have to integrate a network, the stuff that wasn't already intended to be networked and integrated. Okay. That really starts getting into artificial intelligence, machine learning, data orchestration, reliable comm across all domains. How do I bring all of that together? And then the other thing where industry can really help us is you have multiple customers that don't realize that they are all dependent on the same contractor. You have the ability to be the telephone operator and connect dots between users that we don't already know exists. And you may think I know what the Navy's up to. I will tell you I don't have any idea what the Navy's up to. But if you said, hey, you need to call General or Admiral or Commander such and such, that would be a huge service to us to get us talking about how to connect these pieces better together. Okay. That's what we're going to be asking from industry, at least out of the gate, until we figure out what capabilities we want under Golden Dome.
Okay. And yet, one of the things when last year You and General Saltzman had announced the competitive endurance,
Yes.
right? The three-piece strategy. This year, when you guys spoke at AFA Colorado, I noticed a much more aggressive space superiority.
Yes.
In other words, that's the imperative. Could you help flesh out our mind as far as what has caused the focus on the three pieces of competitive endurance to really become a absolute imperative for space superiority ASAP?
So first of all, the threat gets a vote, and the threat has been changing every single year, significantly. But I will argue that space superiority was always under competitive endurance. We probably didn't highlight it as much as we probably should have, and that's really what has changed. So under competitive endurance, the first thing you got to do is deny operational surprise. Space is big, and we know that we can't keep an eye on anything and everything up there in space, especially if I just rely on DoD capabilities. So we need the ability to deny operational surprise. That comes in two flavors. One is I have to have the space situational awareness to understand it, but it also takes you to the next element of competitive endurance, which was to survive first mover advantage or prevent first mover advantage. Because space is so vast, the person or the country that throws the first punch has a significant advantage over their adversary. We need to be able to absorb that first punch or deny that first punch. That really gets into the resiliency of our capabilities.
Yes, sir.
That really gets into our partnerships, et cetera. But the last element of competitive endurance is responsible counterspace campaigning. Counterspace campaigning is the ability to hold red at risk while having the ability to deny their ability to hold you at risk. Okay. That is kind of what our theory is under responsible counterspace campaigning. Well, in order to do responsible counterspace campaigning, I need to have space superiority. How do I achieve space superiority is really the question. That's the dialogue that we're starting to expand on, is how do I conduct responsible counterspace campaigning, hold red at risk while also protecting blue. Okay. That's what we're trying to do. And the whole intent of competitive endurance is we want to remain competitive to deter the adversary's aggression. Because if we're not competitive, they're going to be emboldened to act. So competitive endurance is all about deterrence. But at the end of deterrence, if deterrence fails, you need the ability to defeat your adversary. That gets into that end concept of responsible counterspace campaigning.
Yes, sir. And the one common theme I've taken away from last year and this year is the speed of the resourcing of the Space Force had been very aggressive and then suddenly hit a plateau just as your new missions were beginning to come online. And so, not to be inappropriate, and I'll defer to you on what you can say and not say, but one of the issues that had come up is really an idea of maybe what's happening with that 8% type of activity going forward. In other words, not without being inappropriate. And presumably, if you had that extra money, where would you really spend it? What is the handful of really things that if the president were standing here today and you said, I got to spend it on this and that and this and that it would be a self-fulfilling argument?
So I can't begin to predict where the president is going to put that 8%.
Yes, sir. I apologize, sir.
No, but I can tell you what our priorities are, and I'll get to that. So let me start with, there's one thing you said that's not true.
Yes, sir.
You said that we experienced an enormous amount of resource growth at the beginning. We didn't. We had a whole lot of different capabilities being put into the Space Force that weren't in the Space Force when we were under the Air Force. Okay. We brought in Navy SATCOM, we brought in the Army, we brought in JTAGs. There's a whole lot of capabilities that we brought in to space that were resourced someplace else, but were now in my budget.
So it was a net zero.
And it made it look like we grew faster than we really did, and we really didn't.
Yes, sir.
But when you get into that 8%, so we're looking at, the task that we've been given is to look across the entire department to look at where would we realign 8% of our TOA. Not cut budget, but where would we realign 8% of the TOA. So we are offering up what we think are opportunities for a take, and we're also offering opportunities we think where we need to invest. From a Space Force perspective, first and foremost is space superiority. Second is space domain awareness. And the third is mesh network for communications and C2. Those are the three areas that we within the Space Force are investing or trying to invest the most in. Space superiority, space domain awareness, and space C2 and SATCOM.
And so when you're saying things, I heard that same theme of General White's briefing was the country needs more Air Force, but not more of the same. And so for the first time, it's clicked in my mind that you're saying, hey, there's certain things that you might be able to do less of.
Yes.
Is there a handful of things, one or two things we should be, and I can see you trying to move into the commercial market to do that as well. Is there a handful of things of those missions we should think of?
Not that I'm prepared to talk about, but we are looking at offloading some of our legacy capabilities to commercial or to our allies. We are looking at where I can actually stop some of our development programs and make an immediate pivot to commercial, or an immediate pivot to our allies.
Okay.
Because what we want to do under our current acquisition philosophy is first exploit anything and everything we have. So if I have it or anybody else has it, I want to exploit it to the best ability by networking and integrating it in ways that nobody ever thought about before. Second thing I want to do is buy anything and everything I can.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day, I only want to build what I absolutely must.
Okay.
That's the philosophy that we're using when we go through the 8% drill.
And so this is why all of a sudden I saw General Purdy, like a couple of weeks ago, suddenly do that right-hand pivot.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense now,
Yes.
because it wasn't until I heard both your briefing and General White's briefing before you of, hey, there's going to be, it isn't just I want more of the 8%, there are going to be things that I have to lower priority, non-essential missions I'm going to have to be prepared
And
to
I
give
would
up.
say there's a little bit of cause and effect.
Yes,
We
sir.
put the commercial strategy out last April,
Yes, sir.
and now you're seeing the effect
Yes, sir.
12 months later at a government
sir.
speed.
Yes, sir. As I'm giving your money away too. Everybody else, sir, I apologize. I think you said you're down to the last 4 minutes. I think you said you'd be comfortable with a couple questions. Go ahead, ma'am. Here, I'll bring the microphone to you. Will you use speaker's prerogative? Sorry about that, ma'am.
Thanks. Hi, this is Teresa Hitchens from Breaking Defense. Thank you for doing this. Nice to see you. You just used the term dogfighting, that you'd seen adversaries practicing dogfighting in space. Given the constraints of the laws of physics and the fact that people don't move very fast in space, can you define what you mean by that, and perhaps say a little bit about how the U.S. might be able to counter that kind of capability? Thank you.
With our commercial assets, we have observed 5 different objects in space maneuvering in and out and around each other in synchronicity and in control. That's what we call dogfighting in space. They are practicing tactics, techniques, and procedures to do on-orbit space operations from one satellite to another. What else?
It's Jason Gursky from Citigroup. You just mentioned that you will buy what you can, build what you must. So I'm wondering if you can just provide a little bit more detail on where you think you can buy today as opposed to build. What are you seeing out there in the marketplace today?
So if you read the commercial strategy, there's a spectrum of capabilities. Heavily commercial, a little bit of DoD, all the way to the bottom of the spectrum where it's mostly DoD, a little bit of commercial. So if you start at the top, you got SATCOM. SATCOM is heavily commercial, heavily allied with a mix of DoD. That's probably our most closest to being a hybrid architecture today. One step below that is space domain awareness. We are buying a tremendous amount of space domain awareness today from our commercial partners, and then also looking to collaborate with our international partners. You come down that spectrum a little bit more and you got position, navigation, and timing, where it's mostly government, but we are now having some experiments with commercial to see if is there a better way of doing position, navigation, and timing, or multiple different ways of doing it. As you keep coming down that path, surveillance, reconnaissance, and tracking, that spectrum starts to spread out a little bit more. And then you get to the bottom, which is Counterspace. That's mostly all, or actually today, all DoD kit. So we have an entire spectrum. But it is our intent that in that entire spectrum, if it exists in the wild, I don't mean PowerPoint slides, if it exists in the wild, if commercial has it or allies have it, we would much rather go down that path and integrate it into the enterprise rather than try to go it alone and go build something new and exquisite. So that's what we mean by that, exploit, buy, build.
General Tom Carrico from CSIS over here. You said the magic of Golden Dome would be the integration of all these things together, including things that perhaps were not intended to be integrated. And I wonder if you could elaborate on the challenge, where we're going to find the expertise, where the systems integration knowledge is likely to come from on that point. It's not just space and missile defense, it's all kinds of different weapon systems, all kinds of different bandwidths and fire control things. How's all that going to be put together in how you think about it? And then also, if you might be able to touch upon the discussions about selling off the S-band part of the spectrum and how that might affect military radars.
Okay, so let me take the first question. Where are we going to get the expertise? Most of it's going to come from industry. We in the government are not very good at system engineering. We think we are, and we keep starting to start programs, but in the end, we're probably not the best at it. Industry is probably the best at it. But then you start getting into data standards, network standards, interface standards, all of that kind of stuff, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of that is in industry as well. So when we talk about Golden Dome, it really is a whole nation. It's bringing in all the services, it's bringing in all the agencies, it's integrating across Title 10, Title 50, and in some cases, it might even be bringing in our allies. So that's where we're going to get the capabilities to integrate and network all that stuff. As far as selling off spectrum, I can't comment on any specific bandwidth or spectrum allocation, but what I can tell you is spectrum is a national resource, just like air. It can be polluted, it can be congested, and it can be contested. And we have to protect and defend it. And once we sell it off, we're never going to get it back. So we got to make sure that when we're selling off that national natural resource, that it's the right one to sell off for the right reasons, and that we're not mortgaging our future down the line. So those are the conversations we're having in those lanes.
Hi, sir. Jim Cooper from Counterspace Corporation. Reflecting on what you're saying about your top priorities, space superiority, space probably a build function. SDA, Space C2 probably going to be software reliant, or at least somewhat software reliant. I'm thinking about the new SecDef memo on software acquisition, adaptive architecture frameworks, the CSOs and OTAs. What are the thinking from your space right now on how you want to make use of that and leverage that new memo, and does that change processes for software acquisition from commercial?
So we don't believe it changes what we were already doing with the software acquisition pathways, because we were already pursuing several of those within the Space Force. It does give us one more hammer, though, when we go through the bureaucracy of trying to get a program approved. It says, no, look, they really want us to go fast. They really want us to leverage these new acquisition authorities. That's why we've picked this acquisition pathway to go forward. I think as you look at the future capabilities are going to be very software dependent. Some of them will be purely software, not hardware. And pursuing those acquisition pathways is huge. But then also open architectures, all that other stuff that comes with those, and then going fast with OTAs is going to be the way of the future, I think.
Hey, General. Tom Sharpey from Portal Space. When you talk about exploit, buy, build, does the requirements process that's currently in existence enable that to happen when our near peers are gaining on us or catching us? Because if you wait until the build phase of it to get into a program of record, 5 to 7 years. Any comments on that? Over.
The requirements process does support it. Are we using the requirements process correctly to support it? Probably not. There are probably opportunities to go faster. I know there's a congressional report required on the JSIDS process alone and saying, hey, do we need to streamline the JSIDS process to be able to go faster? But these new acquisition pathways that we're talking about also allow us to go faster, and those acquisition pathways have a mechanism to short circuit their traditional requirements processes as well. So we're taking max advantage of that. We are nowhere near going fast enough, though. I testified last week that we do not have the flexibility within the budgeting system, within the requirement system, within the acquisition system to move fast enough at the pace that we are seeing the threat move today. Keep asking us the hard questions. Keep putting the pressure on your stakeholders going forward. It may not look like it, but we are changing. If you look back 5 years, how we used to do business compared to today, we have changed. Now, we're not changing as fast as we probably should, but we have changed.
Last question, sir.
Okay.
And so disregard that light that says we've run over the clock. Don't worry. Just pretend that you're in my house, sir. You're always welcome here. What if you had $1 more, where would you spend it? And then number two, what, if anything, in your case, I say, if anything, keeps you up at night, sir?
Easy question. So $1 more would be spent on space superiority to protect the Pacific Fleet.
Yes, sir.
And the Joint Force. And what keeps me up at night is the pace that the adversary is, or the threat is changing every single day. It is an eye-watering pace. It requires our Guardians to be on their A game every single day, and they are absolutely killing it and doing everything they can do to guarantee space superiority for the nation.
Yes, sir.
Without fail.
Well spoken.
Thank you.